Well, hello there, kind listener. This is Tim. You're in the right place. And a little bit of an expositional clip for you to begin the proceedings this week. A news story from about a month ago from Fox 13 Tampa Bay's Evan Axelbank reporting. And we'll talk about this story and more on the other side.
First up here at 6 o'clock, the new owners of the Tampa Bay Rays came forward today, speaking publicly for the first time since they officially closed the deal buying the team from Stu Sternberg. They gathered the media today at their home for the past season, Steinbrenner Field in Tampa. And they promised their first order of business here is putting the drama around this new stadium to rest after more than 2 decades. And we know that will not come easily. Fox 13's Evan Axelbank is live there now with what they had to say today. Evan, I was struck by the real commitment, it seems, to get something done very quickly, weren't you?
Without a doubt. There are certainly some questions that they did answer and some questions that they didn't answer. In particular, they did not answer where the stadium is going to go and how much it's going to cost. But they did make it clear, without a doubt, that Tampa Bay is going to be first to the plate. The easy part is buying the team and posing for pictures. As for the hard part,
we're also determined and pledged to you to build a championship caliber team.
It's actually hard parts, plural, with the need to find a stadium location and figure out who's going to pay for it. Owner Patrick Zalupski is insisting on 100 acres, suitable for building a stadium, stores, restaurants, and potentially a hotel, akin to the Atlanta Braves Battery District.
This development will generate the revenue needed for long-term sustainable success. This in turn will create jobs for our community, supporting economic growth and opportunity in this region for generations to come.
Saying meetings are beginning this week with officials in both Hillsborough and Pinellas counties, they're being non-committal over how much their group will contribute. Pinellas County has been thought to have more money to offer than Hillsborough, though the Tampa mayor is now turning that on its head.
Can the city of Tampa and the Hillsborough County side compete with the financial offer that can be made in Pinellas County?
We already did.
With St. Pete now fielding offers for gas plant development that does not include a stadium, and with the site being only 86 acres as opposed to Zalupski's desired 100 acres, Mayor Welch, who chatted warmly with Mayor Castor, had his own response to questions about a new financial framework.
We're meeting with them this afternoon to start the conversation. We'll let them know what our priorities are. And again, if there's a 100-acre minimum, gas plant's 86 acres. So that kind of makes our decision-making easier.
A 100-acre development would seem to leave the door open to the state fairgrounds in Tampa, as well as to HCC, which is next door to where the press conference was held at Steinbrenner Field. They plan on a fixed roof stadium that can hold between 150 and 180 events a year, including concerts. The new day in Rays history came with a clear statement that they didn't bring blank checks with them.
The economics of the club have not changed since we acquired them. And so, again, you'll hear a common theme, obviously. We've got to create this development. We have to have the revenue.
As far as the baseball side of things goes, what happens on the field? Well, these new owners say that they're going to leave that to the baseball people, that they're going to be responsible for the business side of this and getting that stadium built. Mark?
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see. I know things are going to happen quickly here. Hopefully, Evan Axelbank, and I know you'll keep following it for us. Thanks much.
Welcome to Good Seats Still Available, a curious little podcast devoted to exploring what used to be in professional sports. Here's your host, Tim Hanlon.
All right. Settle down, everybody. How are you? My name's Tim Hanlon. It's Good Seats Still Available, the curious little podcast that is devoted to what used to be in professional sports. Thank you for finding us. Greatly appreciated. And we know you got a lot of choices out there, so thanks for making time for us this week as we go into baseball. Once again, great topic as always. And we're not here to bury or quote-unquote remember Tropicana Field just yet. St. Petersburg, Florida, the place, the Tampa Bay Rays, the story, the baseball team there. Very interesting story in and of itself. But as many know, it is the home, Tropicana Field is, of the Tampa Bay Rays, which, as we record this week, here in November of 2025, just been sold. Stu Sternberg, longtime owner, has officially relinquished ownership of the Tampa Bay Rays franchise to a Florida-based developer by the name of Patrick Zalupski. I think that's how you say it. Team is $1.7 billion in terms of valuation, and the excitement is palpable because there are plenty of folks there who have been following the Rays for decades now, who are very excited at the prospect of not only having a championship team at some point, but also, frankly, a brand new facility. And we don't want to dump on Tropicana Field. It is unique, has its interesting charms, and certainly history. And we're going to get into all of that as the, shall we say, the beginning process of the end is underway down there with our new pal, Bruce Reynolds, who is the author of a great, fun little book called There Is No Place Like Dome, a fan host's unofficial view from the top of the Trop in the to the stands with the fans. It is a wonderful self-published little book, and it is a great reminiscence of his 16-year journey as a fan host. They have these things at Tropicana Field, these sort of hosts who kind of help the fans a little way through their journey. They come to the game and they get settled, and they try to have some fun during the course of the game. Maybe there's music or contests and that kind of stuff. And Bruce has been there pretty much since the beginning of the Rays' existence there, and certainly has seen just about everything at Tropicana Field, both in terms of what it used to be, previous names such as Suncoast Dome, I think it was called for a number of years. It was called the Thunderdome, or either as officially or unofficially references that in the 1990s. And also, lots of other things too there. The Tampa Bay Storm of the Arena Football League were there for a while. The Tampa Bay Lightning enjoyed being in the Thunderdome for sure. Obviously, the Tampa Bay Rays for most of its existence in 1998. You got to remember, this dome was actually built in the began construction in the late 80s and opened in early 1991, I think. So there was a real expectation when they built this stadium that they were going to attract a baseball franchise with it. And it took a number of years until 1998, as a matter of fact, and lots of retrofits and that kind of stuff. But the Rays came. They were known as the Devil Rays back then, but also some other events too. There was this thing called the St. Petersburg Bowl in college football, which you now know as the Gasparilla Bowl, up in, I guess it's now Houlihan Stadium in Tampa, where the Buccaneers play. So that game has moved on from the indoor confines of the dome, and World Wrestling has had a couple of events there and stuff. The East-West Shrine Game had a number of games there over the years, as well as the proverbial concerts and whatnot. But we are here to talk about the current situation with the dome. And as you probably know, it was closed, obviously, because of the hurricane damage from Hurricane Milton about a year ago. And the process of replacing those fabric panels has been well underway. Apparently, it's going pretty well, and actually will be done a little earlier than originally envisioned. And they will be back, the Rays will, in the dome in time for next season. I think they're going to play, I don't know, about 9 to 15 games or so on the road to begin the season. And they're going to be back in, I guess it's probably going to be late April, maybe early May to start the season. So that's pretty amazing. And they played at George Steinbrenner Field, the minor league facility there during the course of this year. But Bruce took a year off, if you will. I think a lot of people did with the organization, because that was a whole different footprint. It was a much smaller venue. Obviously, it was open air. There was like maybe 15,000 seats. But rest assured, the dome and hopefully the fans will be coming back, as will be Bruce, to accommodate all the fans coming in and helping them to have a dynamite time as they watch Rays baseball for probably the next couple of years while the drama of the new stadium and the new ownership plays out. So no better way to celebrate the past, present, and rebirth, if you will, of the present versions of Tropicana Field. And we'll do a little speculation during our conversation about what might transpire in the years ahead, where the new stadium might go, Bruce's recollections and maybe a little predictions and or wish lists, if you will, for his continued involvement, not only with the team, but also hopefully a new stadium sooner rather than later. Let me just quickly promote the book again. It is called There Is No Place Like Dome. It is available wherever you get good books, of course. Maybe you're an independent bookseller down the street may be happy to order it for you and have it delivered, and they'll get a couple of shekels there. It'd be great to keep your local bookstore in business. But of course, if you'd like to help us and keep our lights on, you can go to our website at goodseatsstillavailable.com. You search up this episode. It's numbered 421 with myself and Mr. Reynolds, and you'll find a convenient link or two to our friends at Amazon for the either the paperback or Kindle versions. And as always, we'll get a couple of shekels of referral love to add to our kitty to keep our lights on, pay the electricity bill, and all that kind of stuff. All right, fun times. And let's get into our conversation with Bruce. Delightful gentleman, more delightful guy you will not find. Really interesting story. He just loves doing what he does. And he doesn't get paid a whole lot for it, but frankly, it doesn't matter to him. And one last thing, I forgot one team. There was one game, believe it or not, that was in the Dome in 2009. We talked about the old UFL, the United Football League, the original version. You remember a team called the Florida Tuskers. They were largely based in Orlando, but they actually played one game in 2009 in I guess it was called the Tropicana Field at that point, right? Yeah, I guess it was. So many things have happened in this Dome. And here's my conversation with Bruce. To prove it, please, as always, enjoy. I want to know a little bit about you first and foremost before this story begins, because this is a relatively later in life kind of a journey for you, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, it really is. In the spring training time of 2008, my wife and I are living in St. Petersburg, Florida, and have for quite some time. And the Rays do a fan fest, which most baseball teams do during that spring training time. And we saw an advertisement for a need for ushers. And we went with the idea, thinking, what a great idea to be a service, be an ambassador for the community. And so we did, and they hired us both at that point in time. If you're a baseball fan, 2008 is very significant in the Tampa Bay area because all of a sudden the Tampa Bay Rays went from worst to first. And it was just unheard of in the fact of a team that had never finished 500 was now headed to the World Series. My background is both my wife and I grew up in Baltimore, huge Oriole fan, had an extensive memorabilia collection for quite a period of time, and went to a lot of games at Old Memorial Stadium before Oriole Park at Camden Yards came into play. Matter of fact, I probably attended as many Baltimore Colt games as I did Baltimore Oriole games.
There we go. That's what we like to hear.
Yeah, and have very vivid memories of my dad taking me. And back then, and probably still true today in Baltimore, Baltimore's a football town. And so when the Colts were playing, and back in those days, it was Johnny Unitas and Raymond Berry and Gino Marchetti and all those guys. It was harder to get a regular season ticket for a Colt game than it was to get a playoff game for the Orioles. And, late 60s, early 70s, the Orioles, came on the scene and began their run. But it was a football town. But I remember going to the stadium for both. And it was a cool stadium because it was built in a neighborhood. And if you didn't park in the stadium lot, you often parked on a side street in front of somebody's house and you walked up a neighborhood to go to the game. And so my love of baseball began back then. My dad kind of brought me into that. I lost my dad at an early age at 9, but he's the one that got me involved in sports, both football and baseball. But somehow baseball became the love. And so when we ended up here in the Tampa Bay area in the year of 2008, and we saw the opportunity to be able to be ushers, we jumped at it. I especially jumped at it and have done it for the last 16 years.
It's interesting.
I did not.
You
go ahead. I was going to say, I didn't do it this year with the stadium move to Tampa. I wimped out, quite honestly. I didn't want to deal with the heat and rainstorms, which everybody else pretty much in the country is no big deal. But for us in St. Pete, we've been spoiled. and we've had air conditioning, and we've had a roof over our head. Now, we've done games when we've heard it sounded like monsooning outside. We've done games and we've lost power outages, or at least partially power outages. Early on, I can remember that we would have a partial loss of power. And so on the screen with the power that was still left, they would run Bugs Bunny baseball cartoons. And you knew that we were waiting to get the generators back up to run the rest of the game. But it was just it's been a fun ride. It's been a great opportunity to meet people. Uh, One of the great things I think, Tim, that sports does is it builds community. You can find people from the opposite ends of the spectrum, socioeconomically, politically, educationally, but you could enter from opposite ends of the row. But you sit next to somebody, and for those next 3 hours or whatever, you become family and you high five and you fist bump and you give your opinions of what you think should or shouldn't be done. Often with sports fans, any sport really, the pronoun we is used often. We won, we didn't play well, we didn't tackle well, we couldn't pitch, whatever it was. But again, it's that community. And so that's what sports does in my mind. There's a lot of things you and I could talk about that says what's wrong with sports. But one of the great things of sports, it builds community, and that's a great thing. And I probably would say we could use it now as much as ever in our world and in our society. So it's an escape in some ways, but to be able to be a part of it and to experience it almost on a day-to-day basis when you go to the game. 81 games is a long season. I don't necessarily work all 81, but I work a majority of those. And you see the good, the bad, and the ugly. You can find, a game where your team, my team, the Rays, gets blown out. And the next night, somebody will come by the stadium and they'll be in, Bruce, did you work last night? And I'll say, yeah, I did. I said, that was a terrible game. I was watching on TV. I said, yeah, but you know the biggest difference between me and you? And he said, no. I said, well, you could change the channel. That's kind of where it is. When you're experiencing that, you're there and you experience it all. What got me even more beyond the beauty of the game, and there's a cerebral part of that game that I just love and the strategy, but it is also fans. And I have developed great friendships, and I have had people really become my baseball family. I've been to funerals, I've been to weddings of people that I have known from the stadium, and you get and develop those to the place where probably about 2 or 3 years ago, I felt like there's a story to be told. There's a story to be told from on the other side of the dugout. What goes on in those stands? What happens as people interact? What happens when a foul ball comes that way, or whatever else could take place? And so hence began the compilation of putting together 14 or 15 years of fan experiences and what it's like. And so the title of the book is There's No Place Like Dome. And the tagline is from the top of the Trop to the stands with the fans. And I literally have been to the top of the Trop. I had that opportunity with one of the fans in my section who helped, he was the superintendent, helped put the original roof on. And periodically throughout the season, you have to go up and get the balls that were stuck in the catwalks. And he said to me, if you ever want to go up, let me know. And I didn't ask him to ask me twice. And at the end of one season, my wife and I went up there, and it was a fantastic view. It's a pretty incredible opportunity that I would never get again. So I literally have been at the top of the Trop, but also in the stands with the fans and to be able to mingle. And so that's what kind of prompted the book, but the love. And that's what I miss most, Tim, to be very honest. That's what I miss most this past season. I miss the game. But you can watch that to some degree on the TV, but I miss people. I miss the people, the fans who come, the regulars who come. I miss the casual fan who makes it an outing once or twice a year, and you get to talk to them about baseball, or you get to talk to them about just their family and what's going on in their lives. And often people are thrilled that you, as an usher, would choose to want to speak to them. And then there's others who they love the game. And so it's a great opportunity to talk to fans, whether they're rooting for the Rays or whether they're rooting for the other team. I try to be a pretty knowledgeable baseball fan that I can interact with the fans of the visiting team, and I want them to know they're welcome.
All right. Well, there's lots to unpack there, but let me start with sort of the juxtaposition, right, that you brought up earlier, right? Having gone to college in Washington, D.C., and in a certain age, and having been entranced for a little while by Memorial Stadium, not as much for football because I didn't really. There was a team in town. We didn't have to go to Baltimore to see. But for baseball at the time, right, the Nationals were not in town yet. But you're right. It's a neighborhood park, or was. Interesting, a working class neighborhood, and an
Yes.
established and venerable stadium, and one of the original, if you will, one of the venerable dual purpose stadiums and stuff, right? But homey, kind of more. Baltimore is a smaller market, right, relative to a lot of other ones. I guess you could not have drawn up a different youth baseball experience for you with the arguably much more modern and very almost maybe alien-like experience at a dome in the middle of Florida. How describe this Tropicana field and a little bit about that and your first experiences with it, and then how perhaps you, I don't know, fell in love or like with it.
Sure. And the interesting thing about the Trop is it gets a bad rap. It's an older stadium. There's no denying that. But it's got a charm of its own. I'm never going to put it on the charm of Wrigley or Fenway or anything like that, but it does have a charm of its own. It is one of the few arenas in America that has hosted, beside a World Series, it's hosted Stanley Cup playoffs. It has hosted the Final Four and other preliminary rounds flying into that. It's hosted college football games. It has had Davis Cup tennis, and we've even had the WWE. So the arena itself has its own unique fingerprint, I believe, on American sports.
Yeah, and I don't mean to interrupt, but
No.
you also have to remember too, right, that this facility opened in 1990, really before there was any team, and it was
Oh
used
my goodness, yes.
right, as a
Yeah.
hook to draw a relocation franchise, especially for baseball. And you're mentioning some of those things, right? The Arena Football League and the NHL with the Lightning and that kind of stuff, plus these other events which preceded the Rays' arrival and coexisted thereafter. So I think people kind of really have I guess I could ask the question, sell me on this facility, because I think a lot of people know it only from what they see on television. And with all due respect, on TV, it doesn't come across great.
Well, and that's an interesting point. The fact even that the stadium was an attempt to talk Major League Baseball and bringing a team, but interestingly enough, for teams like the White Sox and the Giants, they used it as a bargaining chip to get new stadiums in their cities. St. Petersburg was very close, both to the Giants and the White Sox coming. In fact, at least the talk is in Chicago, when the vote was to be taken, and it had to be taken before midnight, that they unplugged the clock. And so that they could go past that time, so they finally could negotiate a new stadium. So St. Pete knew the heartbreak of baseball and the business of baseball before it ever actually had a team. But when you go in there, it's just different. Like you said, growing up with Memorial Stadium, and it's that whole smell of fresh cut grass and the open air and things. It's just a different environment. It didn't take me too long to adapt, just because maybe, for lack of better, the Florida heat or the constant thunderstorms that come about and all of a sudden would change everything in regard to the game itself. I just think it has a great charm. I can't tell you the number of people through the years, including visiting team fans, who walk into the dome and when they come out to where the playing field have said to me, "What's wrong with this place? Why don't people like it?" So it's a surprise. Often I think people who want to talk bad, criticize, maybe haven't even been there. They've just heard people say this or that or
I
so
think
forth.
that I definitely think that's right. I think again, most people have not ventured into St. Pete to see a game there, right? So I think
Right.
that's fair. And that said, the television though, right? It doesn't do a lot of it. I'm sure you heard of it, right? I mean, the grass doesn't always necessarily reflect the light perfectly and stuff. I think that's kind of why people kind of feel that way. It's ignorance and or only what they're experiencing on TV.
Oh, absolutely. And yet that's all we ever have to go with. And we listen. We're good people in our communities and in our all the way culture of listening to other people and running with that without having firsthand knowledge and experience. And you can take almost any slice of society, and I think we can get to that. I think also, Tim, part of the critique of the dome coincided with the team wasn't good for a while. And so all this, there was nothing to look at and say, yeah, but look at the play on the field and so forth. And until 2008, the team had never gone over 500. So I believe a lot of that criticism as well was in regards to a reflection of the quality of baseball they were seeing on the field. Since that time, ownership tried to put some money into it and modernize it a little bit. There's only so much that you can do with a facility like that, but I would say it has its own charm, and you just have to get used to and experience it. But also, I think it's the charm of baseball, and it seems like because of so many games, there is a relationship I think fans have with teams that might not be like any other sport simply because the length of the season. And we could talk quite some time about whether it's too long or not. But the fact that it is, people just get into the game. And so therefore, they overlook some of its shortcomings and it's old. There's no two ways about it, but it's still got a charm. And I will tell you honestly, a year ago, October, our family evacuated because we had two hurricanes within less than 2 weeks, I believe. And the second one, Milton, which was so much more devastating, we evacuated the state. I was awakened about 3:45 in the morning, a text telling me that things were still going on in St. Pete, but the roof had ripped off, and I couldn't believe it. I couldn't go back to sleep. And here I am in Charlotte, North Carolina, trying to find a news report about Tropicana Field. And when I finally saw the first footage and the roof being ripped off, I was stunned. I found tears in my eyes. I found that it was a friend of mine who had been hurt. Is it correspond? Is it of greater value than other people's homes or businesses or their lives? Of course not. But there was still that emotional tug on me that I found myself grieving for my friend that had been injured and wounded severely in regards to that. I think also part of the charm in stadiums, but particularly for the Trop, is you have memories and you go back and you listen to people who will talk to you about where they were at certain times. It has only been about, maybe a little about a month ago, a local channel here did a full hour broadcast on game 162 back in what 2011, I believe, when it was all baseball. They call it one of the perfect storms of baseball when all these teams were playing and the Rays came back down 7-0 to come back and win to go into the playoffs in the wild card. That's what people remember. They remember where they were. Also, I would say, and this kind of ties into the usher part of it, I believe part of my job a significant part of my job is to do what I can to enhance a fan's experience while they're at the game. I have no impact, no effect what goes on the field. But if you're sitting around where my section is or two, I can have a significant impact on your experience, regardless of the score. And so sometimes it's, what's that old saying? People won't remember what you say or what you did, but they'll remember how you made them feel. In my mind, that's a role of an usher. That's what we do. How do we do that in the midst of a stadium that, gets its fair share of critique, but it's still one and has hosted, particularly since 2008, some quality baseball, probably within the top five of win-loss records from that time on.
So tell me before the roof issue with the hurricane, and we'll talk about what it's going to hopefully be like after it reopens again. But take us through, if we have been walking into the stadium, what was and what is sort of the experience as you bring in people to their seats, as you effectively act as their host. What are you pointing out in the stadium? What are you telling them that they should see, or how to better experience the game, the amenities of the, or lack thereof, of the stadium, things to look out for, watch out for, either positively or potentially for their own safety, that kind of stuff. What am I, as somebody perhaps maybe who's only seen it on television, what could I be looking forward to besides hopefully a quality game on the field?
Yeah, well, I think the fact of you have to get used to an indoor stadium and you have to recognize that. Some ways that's pretty recognizable because the fact it's 72 degrees. It's nice. There's no humidity. There's no rain. There's no heat. This year in Tampa at Steinbrenner Field where the Rays played, it was beastly hot. I mean, it was difficult to even sit down on seats at times. I'm sure you've got a listening audience. People say, yeah, well, you ought to be at this stadium or that stadium, and this is what we do. But in the Trop, you don't have to worry about that. That's not a consideration. You can relax with that. It's the only stadium that has live rays, devil rays swimming out in the outfield. That's something to take a look at. For a long time, it used to have the Ted Williams Hitters Museum. Fantastic piece of smaller, obviously, Cooperstown, but the opportunity to see that. There's little quirks of even the catwalks, as infuriating as they can be at times, it still adds that interesting quirk of what goes on and so forth. So it's that kind of environment to welcome people in to talk baseball. Baseball, Tim, I feel like is probably the best sport to socialize because it's a slower paced game. And I encourage people that, enjoy that. And if people are talking to me about, buying tickets, I said, how many are in your group? And if they go beyond 4 or more, I say, don't sit down the row, sit in front of each other and talk. There's something about the Trop like that. And even I would say, I'll tell you what's one part of the charm, is that you can hear it monsooning outside and still be playing baseball. There's something about hearing the rain pound on that roof and going, hey, we're okay, and we're still playing. My role is to some degree to entertain. I have done that throughout the years. We have a promotion at the stadium and started before I ever jumped on board with it for if Rays pitchers throw 10 strikeouts. And when it first started was that there was a furniture store, ironically, that if you took your ticket there after 10 strikeouts, you could turn in a coupon, and it was for Papa John's Pizza, and you could get, pizza for that. And so I decided after a couple of years working there had to be more fun to that. So I ended up buying a hat that looked like a beret that looked like a pizza and a flag that said pizza. And every time we got 10 strikeouts, I'd run to the bottom of the dugout there and hold that flag up and the pizza hat and so forth. And it was just another way to have fun. And people really got into it.
Well, they wouldn't forget either, right? To take advantage of it.
Yeah, exactly. And it developed almost a character of its own. Periodically, it would be on the Jumbotron. MLB Network picked it up one time because they were running a special on what's their favorite topping, player's favorite topping on pizza. And next thing you know, here this goofy usher in St. Petersburg is running down the aisle holding up this pizza flag. Got referenced from ESPN in a playoff article and so forth. So he developed he being me, developed its own character until the fact, and no one even thought to even tell me that they were now going to change that. And we went from pizza to burgers. So I had to find a burger hat, which wasn't hard. But the fact of, so what kind of flag do you hold up that has something to do with burgers? The promotion was with Burger King. And so I have my wife make this creative flag that it said "King Me," and so kind of play off on the game of checkers, but also drew people's attention because you need the flag. If you just run down there with a goofy hat, nobody pays any attention to you. We went from there to subs, and that became very difficult and challenging. But my wife is an incredible seamstress and outstanding creativity to the fact she created this hat that looks like a sub, and it was glued to one of my Rays baseball hats. I wore it on backwards, made of foam. It was probably, I don't know, 12, maybe a foot and a half long. And I'm running down there with this crazy sub hat on my head, but I still needed a flag. I still needed something to get people's attention and so forth. And for quite a period of time, the marketing department at the Rays has used the term "raise up." And after a while, I thought, I know what I want on the flag. And so instead of saying "raise up," it said "raise sub." And so held that flag. And, people got into it. And now lately, about the last 5 or 6 years, we've done tacos. The fun part of it is, Tim, is that people get into it and they cheer about it. They're looking for you when there's 10 strikeouts. And I can't tell you how many pictures I've taken with people with the flag and with the hat. And I had a 90-year-old woman who was celebrating her birthday who wanted to hold the pizza flag. I've had the little league teams come and want to hold a flag. Again, it's that involvement. It's allowing the fans to experience the game. And to the event of, I did that and I still do that, but I felt like a couple of years ago, there still needed to be more, particularly if you remember with baseball, both college and major league, they wanted and have done and you could see it in the World Series with Toronto, and you saw it with Seattle too, did something in the dugout when somebody hit a home run. I think the Jays do a coat, some kind of sport coat. The Mariners, I think, do a trident or so forth. I felt like we need to do something in the stands. And I finally came up with what I thought was a pretty good idea and bought a derby and had my wife and daughter put letters on it. And it's the home run derby. And so when the Rays player hits a home run, I run down the steps, find a fan cheering wildly for the Rays. I get to allow them to wear the home run derby for a while. Then I come back and get it from them. But it's another way to get people involved in it. And that's my feeling. I want a good experience. I want people to leave feeling like, you know what, I had a good time. We might not have won. I still had a good time. And so that's my goal, and hence that's why I chose to write the book, because I felt like there's probably a lot of people, even in the stadium, who don't know a lot what's going on in that regard. And, fans are what makes sports up. That's what we live for. That's why podcasts to sports radio exist, for fans and to recollect and to share their experiences. And so I try to add to the Trop the best I can. The Rays have been very gracious and allowed me to do my goofiness. I'm the only guy that does that. There are other people that do, their own unique things, but I've kind of taken pride in it and I've enjoyed it. And so because of that, I feel like I'm doing my job.
Yeah, it sounds like you've been given a bit of leeway there. Are you an employee of the team or the stadium or both, or it's a quasi, and how are you exploring that freedom, and how did you discover that you could kind of do that?
Well, I'm an employee of the team. And honestly, I just started doing it with the pizza, and I really didn't ask anybody. I just thought this would be kind of fun. And I felt like, if anybody had some objection, they would let me know. And they've embraced it. They're fine with that. My people that I report to know that I do it. They laugh with a lot of other fans in regards to that, but they've been very supportive. One of the things I really appreciate about the Rays organization is they're not trying to cookie cutter us. And so you can be who you are, as long as you're looking out for the fan. You're being concerned for the fan. You are, their experience, but also their needs or what can happen. And I don't know how many years now since Major League Baseball's put those screens up that go pretty much all the way down the foul line. Before those screens were put up, there was a lot of concern from my position of people who were sitting close to the field, and many of them weren't paying attention. Tim, as well as anybody, that there's not a schedule for a foul ball. Hey, third inning and the second out, you're going to get a foul ball. It can come at any time, and you've got to be watching what you're doing. And I, to my horror, at times, with people down there that just weren't paying attention or had young children down there. I'm not saying don't bring them. I just say you need to be careful. So that was a concern before the screens went up. I have a concern for anytime a foul ball, even though it's going to come over the screen, it could ricochet off the back and come back. My job when a foul ball enters my section to go down immediately to make sure everybody's okay. Honestly, about 99% of the time, the only thing hurt from a fan is his pride because he didn't catch it, bounced off his hand. I think, in my opinion, adults who bring their gloves to games are a liability. I think most of them are not good. I really would like to say to them, sir, you weren't any good in Little League 30 years ago. You have not improved. You might just want to leave that glove in the trunk. And yet you get kids who are flashing leather all over the place. But it is a concern when a baseball comes down there. So I do need to be down there to making sure that they're okay and that there isn't anything serious or somebody needs ice. So you're constantly looking over fans and keeping an eye on what's going on while still trying to, carry on my shenanigans from whether it's 10 strikeouts, which is a lot more predictable. Even though I will tell you, I feel like the teams bait me sometimes that when we have 9 strikeouts and 2 strikes on a guy, and I'm ready to go down there with this taco hat and taco flag. And as the pitch comes, I'm halfway down on a step and he puts the ball in play and everybody around me is laughing. You just want to be alert to all that. So you're a fan of the game, but you're more concerned about the fans of the game and what you can do to enhance that. And the Rays have been very supportive and allowed me to continue to do my goofiness as I do it.
So you've been doing this for 15, 16 years or so. Describe the fan base to me. I know the team was wildly popular in the early years, of course, because it was new and fresh and baseball and all that kind of stuff. And it's had its ups and downs in terms of attendance, obviously winning on the field a number of years, especially the last, decade or so, or at least consistent contention certainly doesn't help. But aside from the numbers and the crowd and what constitutes the crowd, how much of it is kids or older adults? How many are transplants? How many are visiting fans? How unique or ununique, if you will, of a fan base are Rays attendees in your experience?
It's a great question. I think when you live in Florida, you become a melting pot. There are not as many native people that live in Florida. There are native Floridians, obviously, but not as many. So therefore, you do get a lot of visiting team fans who live in the area. And they have moved here from Detroit or Cleveland or, San Francisco for that matter. And so when their team comes in, they're out in all regalia and everything. However, there are any number of those type of fans I just described who were Rays fans the rest of the year. It's just when their team comes in, and sometimes you will find a number of people who were wearing a Tigers jersey and wearing a Rays hat. That's just somewhat of the norm that takes place there. That's the uniqueness that happens.
It's like their original. It's like their original fandom is their love for the game, but it's a recognition that the team locally is Tampa Bay, and I can maybe serve both masters or enjoy both of them sort of harmoniously, perhaps.
Yeah, it is. It is. Or they are such diehard and fill in the blank of team that on those days they will root against the Rays and they will root for whoever it might be, that team. And that's fine, and it's easy to kind of joke with them. In the central part of this Tampa Bay area, we have a high percentage of people who have moved from New York or are high intensity of Yankee fans. Part of that is because they do spring training in Tampa. And so you get a lot of that loyalty. Matter of fact, Yankee fans are some of the most fun people to talk with in my mind, because and you will appreciate this being old school and understanding. To me, beside the fact of all the world championships, one of the things that makes Yankees distinctive as a franchise is they've never worn names on the back of their jerseys. Obviously, they were one of the first teams to correspond the number of the jersey to what place in the order they batted. And it has always been that way. So I think as a baseball fan, that's a great tradition to keep up. However, when you see some Yankee fans come in and they've got a jersey or they have a t-shirt jersey on, and on the back it says 8 Berra or 3 Ruth. It's almost fingernails on the chalkboard for me because it's just like, what are you doing? And so I will find Yankee fans who just have a number and without a name on the back, and we get talking about that. And they just cannot believe that somebody that's ushering and working at the Rays Stadium knows about this issue and feels as passionately as I've had fathers bring their sons over. Come over here, listen to this guy. See what he's saying? See what it's supposed to be? Or, they're not really Yankee fans if they're wearing that kind of thing. And it's another fun way to involve people, but to get to know that. But the fan base, it is developed now after 25 years so that you do have more people, kids who have grown up, good grief. And, 2008, some of them were not very old, but they remember that World Series. And so they remember the playoffs and they remember game 162. One of the things that happened in Tampa Bay, and I'm not downplaying any place else, but COVID was huge for us in the fact that, granted, a shortened season, but the Rays went to the playoffs and made it to the World Series, and none of us got to experience it firsthand because, you were playing, they played out in San Diego and then in Texas. And really, at the same time, as far as Tampa Bay goes, we had the Lightning that went to the Stanley Cup playoffs. And again, same thing. Didn't get a chance to experience that because they're on the road, and including right toward the end of COVID, when the Super Bowl was here and the Bucks were here. They were the first NFL team to have the Super Bowl in their home stadium, and there was only like 20,000 people allowed to be in there. So it was a lot of that missing from fans of being able to be involved and root for their team. So the fan base of the Rays, a lot of corporations, a lot of business people. When you work as an usher as I do, I pretty much am in the exact same spot. I've been there probably for 14 years. So I know a lot of people. I know who are the season ticket holders, who are the people that are involved in this company and are coming with tickets and so forth. So you get that in regards to that. And then you get a lot of kids who are growing up that way and wearing their merchandise and so forth and coming with their gloves. And then you get the people who can financially only afford a game or two. Golly, it's probably been 12 years ago or so. It was during batting practice, and I noticed a mom kind of sitting at the end of the row and kind of squinting and looking down toward the field. And I went down, I said, "Can I help you?" She said, "Oh, no." I said, "My son's just standing there. He's trying to get an autograph and standing there." And I said, "Well, that must be fun to do." And she began to tear up and she said, my son has a visual disease that is eventually going to cause him to go blind. And he said his vision's not that great now, and but we wanted to bring him and be able to see as much as he could. And I could tell that she was touched by it, and I was trying to be sensitive to it. And then I finally excused myself and came back to her and I said, I think we can help you. And she said, "What do you mean?" And so we were able to work it down that they able to sit right next to the dugout. Matter of fact, one of the players gave him his batting gloves. And it's a game that he'll never forget because of that. That's part of what you're doing too as an usher. What is it you can do? You can't do that for everybody. You can't squeeze everybody down in those kind of seats. But when you can do something like that, you build your fan base, that's for sure. But that wasn't my intent. It was just I got touched by this mom's story, and I was glad that we were able to help. And so that's part of what it is too. There are people who have been there from the beginning, since '98. and they will tell you about it and what their thoughts are and so forth, and what should be done and what shouldn't be done. Or they're just proud that they were there at the beginning when it was the Devil Rays, and then it became Tampa Bay Rays, and so it's a mixture, Tim. I'm not sure that I would say there's anything. The thing I would say is probably most distinctive is the fact that we have a lot of transplants, and so some of that loyalty is mixed when their particular team comes to town.
Sounds like you gotta work hard, not just yourself, but also as an organization to, uh, lack of a better word, convert, right? Or at least make it
Good word.
easy and or enticing to be a fan of the team that's right in front of you versus holding on and just, for the team that might visit once or twice during the course of the season and wear their jerseys as well. Because I got to think as somebody who's there on a regular basis like you are, right? It's got to be a tad bit perturbing / infuriating to see, I don't know, a preponderance of visiting team fans in jerseys. I mean, great, they'll spend money and they'll fill up the stadium a bit, right? But you're a homer, right? You want to see the experience enhanced by folks who are there to see the team that's the home base there.
Absolutely. And I think probably the biggest thing would be you have come here from wherever, fill in the blank of that city, but hopefully you're trying to raise your children, because this is your home now, to be Rays fans. Not that they're growing up still to be Tiger fans or to be Red Sox fans or whatever, when this is the place you live. That to me is probably a little more frustrating. But like you said, they're there and they're enjoying the game, and that's really the issue. But as far as what you'd like to see, yeah, I'd like to see more people allow their kids to grow up to be Rays fans. But that's their family, and they make those decisions in regards to that. And fans are funny people. They're called fans for a reason. They're fanatics, and so therefore you recognize that, and the fact that knowing that anybody can go overboard. And it's not just, well, that's, when there's an issue or something, that must be the visiting team fans. No, not really. Not necessarily. I can remember a playoff game a few years ago, and we had the afternoon slot. And so we had a lot of business people coming from work, and their ties were loosened and stuff. And it was like 3 or 4 rows in the dugout. And I went down there at one point, and these businessmen were arguing, and I thought they were kidding. And they were just kind of getting more and more heated. And finally, I was like, guys, what's going on? And I'll never forget this, Tim. This businessman with his tie loosened stood up, and he said to me, he said, Bruce, he started it. And I said, did you really just say that? Did you really just express that in that kind of form? And almost everybody around could hear him, and it almost sounded that childish. I said, guys, and they're all Rays fans. I said, guys, get your act together here. Security comes down, they might run you, and you probably pay pretty good money for these tickets. People get consumed. We get involved, and you get passionate about your team. But that's a good thing about sports. For those hours you're there, you kind of it's a fantasy. It's an escape, and that's a good thing. But you got to be sensitive to it as well, and you got to be sensitive to the people around you, and that's part of the job as well. Making sure that people are okay. We're big at the Trop on profanity. We just don't allow it. But often I don't hear it because people are yelling it toward the field, and I need to have somebody come tell me. And you have to go down and tell them. And I understand that for some people that they don't even think about it. That's just the way they talk and speak. I go, but you got a lot of kids around here. We just can't allow you to continue to do that. Some people understand and apologize, and other people are madder at you than they are the policy afterwards. But that's fans, and you just have to know that those kind of things are going to happen. You're dealing with the public, and that's an unknown quantity on a day-to-day basis.
Take me back to 2008 for a minute, because I think it's lost on people who have not followed the team very closely about just how important and distinctive that year was. Obviously, you got hooked into the organization around that time. Can you kind of just describe a little bit of it? Because you mentioned, you hinted at it. There's a name change. There's a new owner. It's Stuart Sternberg. Just give a little bit of just how dramatic a change it was, because arguably that it truly set a new direction in motion for that team after the first, first number of years of its existence.
Absolutely. Yeah, 2008 came, and all of a sudden, ownership decided to take the name, instead of saying Devil Rays, just call them the Tampa Bay Rays. There became a new uniform, a new color scheme, and so that was the beginning of a new season. And then all of a sudden, this team started winning and continued to win. And, for a long time, being in the American League East, they were just kind of the white, the doormat for the Red Sox and for the Yankees, and at time for, Toronto, and then the Orioles in there and so forth. But the Rays were just, the bottom of the barrel. And all of a sudden, you've got this group of players that are all of a sudden blossoming at the same time, a Carl Crawford or a BJ Upton, and you got this rookie named Evan Longoria coming in. Then you got a veteran like Carlos Pena, and then you've got this mixture of pitchers from James Shields to Scott Kazmir, and then this #1 draft pick out of Vanderbilt, a guy named David Price, comes in and helps clinch the pennant for them. And all of a sudden, it's like, whoa, what is happening? And even at the All-Star break, it was like they were the talk of the league, and like everybody was kind of pulling for them, if for nothing else, just because it was a heartwarming story of seeing what could take place. And the environment got better, and people, you always come when there's winners, and this area was not used to that. They had not experienced that. The games in September didn't have any real meaning or significance, and now every game had significance. And that year was my first year. I can remember working in that part of the stadium, and we were counting down outs until the Rays had clinched a playoff berth. 8 outs to go or 4 outs to go, and it was just all that environment and the excitement that teams like that, and happens periodically for us. It had never happened before, and now it was. We weren't waking up from a great dream. This was reality. And so they end up and they make the playoffs, and then they kind of go through the playoffs. They beat the White Sox, and now all of a sudden we're playing for the pennant, and we're playing the mighty Red Sox, and they go up like 3-1, and it looks like, it's going to be a World Series. And then the next thing you know, the Red Sox make a major comeback in Game 5. They come back to the Trop and they win Game 6. And now all of a sudden it's Game 7 and everything is on the line. And, pretty much anybody can tell you where they were that night when I think it's Jed Lowry of the Red Sox hits the ball to Aki Iwamura, the second baseman, who runs over and tags second base. And the next thing is that the impossible just became possible. The Rays are going to the World Series, and it was just phenomenal. It was a magical year of baseball, but it just electrified this area to see what baseball really could be about.
Wasn't there also, there was also a bunch of other stuff going on too, right? New ownership. Didn't they also take sort of to take down or carve out or how can I best describe it? Tarp over the upper deck and start to reduce some of the seating a little bit and make it a little bit more intimate and that kind of stuff too.
That happened after 2008. At that point, that was still open, and of course, all that was open during the playoffs and the World Series. That did happen in later years in regards to that, as far as some attendance issues and so forth, but it did not happen in 2008.
But I'm assuming it made it more, and in the years since, right? Obviously, there's been, you mentioned how quote unquote old the stadium is. It's gone through some different renovations and stuff over time, right? But it feels to me like all of those things, and I would imagine too, even after the roof gets fixed, and we'll talk about that next in a second, there's probably for this, it's also around, it's paralleled baseball's, I want to say throwback per se, but it's been more of a move towards smaller and more intimate versus larger and more cavernous.
Yes, definitely so. And I think people, for the most part, appreciate that. However, even in the midst of that, there are people who like kind of being in their area of the stadium, wherever that is. And whether there's a lot of people around them or not really doesn't make any difference to them. They're upper deck people, or they're, someplace in the corners, or something like that. So yes, it does. And I think there is something about intimacy. I think we're seeing that in newer ballparks, which is a reflection going back to older ballparks, that it becomes more of uh, intimacy is the best word I've got. And so it creates that. And again, it's the sports building community. It's that idea of people relating to each other and getting into this together, and agonizing as well as cheering plays on. And there's just nothing like it. I mean, I respect the people who aren't sports fans, but I tend to feel like you miss a lot in regards to that. There's a lot of life. There's a lot of things. Some of it we would say would even be fantasy, but there's a lot of life in sports that you can experience and vicariously, and being a fan. And there's there's great TVs and there's great ways to watch it, but there's nothing like being at a live game, whatever that sport might happen to be.
All right, I want to get your takes on the future in just 1 second. We'll end on sort of that note. But before we do that, can you give me a sense of some of the other events that you've been part of there at the Trop? I mean, you mentioned a few in our email correspondence and stuff.
Sure.
And also maybe what the stadium is like in a non-baseball kind of setting. For example, concerts, how's the sound in that kind of thing? Football, like how does the stadium elegantly handle a gridiron footprint versus the baseball diamond that arguably the stadium was kind of reconfigured around? That kind of stuff,
Yeah,
how incongruent is it or not,
Yeah, it's a different environment. It's a different, often you're going to get a different type of fan that comes. The football arrangement basically runs the end zone almost by third base dugout, runs all the way out to right field. So you've got to reacclimate yourself of what you're watching and what you're seeing in regards to that. When you get to a bowl game, they were the lesser tier bowls, but you still had loyal fan bases that were coming in. And, next thing you know, you got bands, you got, you got the football bands that are coming in. That was a whole different mindset. You get the East-West Shrine game. Now that's something different, because now you've got an all-star game and you have parents and families from players all over the country, different sizes of schools. And then you also have the Shriners, who are the supporters of that, and their organization coming. And so different style, different motivation, pockets of fans rooting and cheering for different things to get to what it was. Concerts, it did open with some concerts, but most recently, within the last, 12 years, I would say at least, there were concerts at the end of the game. And each concert would be a different genre of music, obviously to appeal to fans to come and to hear the concert. Because of that, you have people who came to baseball games who didn't know a whole lot about the game. You consequently would have people who wouldn't come till the seventh or eighth inning, because they kind of figured out when the game was going to be over and when the concert was going to start. The reverse would be you have baseball fans who all of a sudden, here's a concert at the end of the game. I don't know this individual. I don't know this group. I'm going to sit through a couple of songs and see if I like it. Some stayed and some left, so that whole dynamic changed. But the most unique one was a couple of years ago, the WWE had the Royal Rumble at Tropicana Field. And I had no idea what was going to take place, but I wanted to be there. I wanted to work that game. There were 8,000 seats on the field near the rink and so forth. The stadium was completely sold out, 44,000 and some. From my understanding, there were people from all over the world, every state in the union, people came, and that's the type of fan that it drew. And honestly, I thought we might potentially have some real issues, fan behavior. Tim, I have never seen a better behaved crowd than I saw at Royal Rumble.
How about
They
that?
were into it, they were involved with it, and when the match started, nobody left their seat. Matter of fact, you almost made a note to yourself saying, The time to go to the restroom, Bruce, is when the match starts because nobody's leaving. They're all there and you can get right in and get right back out. But they were very well behaved. The only thing that we did over and over and over again that night was give directions because they'd never been there. They had no idea. And so, however, the Trop is laid out just like any other stadium. You had to be able to direct them to say, here's where you are. Now you need to go this way and so forth. But other than that, unbelievably well behaved. No problems, no issues, nothing. And it was very, very impressive. And it was a fun night to be there and watch all that took place in something that I had only watched sporadically on TV.
Honest assessment. How is football in the dome? Seats, sight lines, that kind of stuff.
Sight lines are not bad. They put a temporary set of seats and kind of I want to call it kind of a club area type of thing with food and stuff on one of the sidelines. It's a temporary, so that kind of takes that cavernous out where it would be left field and center field and so forth. So it makes it more intimate. And with that, the sidelines are good. I don't think there's anything with that. You're not going to get in a bowl game the excitement I think you're going to get on a regular season game when you've got a home team, particularly with the bowl games that came to St. Pete. Quality teams, obviously bowl worthy, but obviously a lot of travel involved. And so depending on when it was, early bowls often could even be scheduled just before Christmas. And so that made it tight on fans and family to be able to travel. So you would get these kind of pockets of cheering and so forth, but you wouldn't just get what you would be typical, what you would assume a fan response or fan cheering for a football game. And
Well,
as I said, with the East-West, a little bit even more different.
Yeah, it's also a production of the ESPN events thing, which is, I think, by themselves, I think, is the production team behind like 12 to 15 of the bowls season, right? And as part of that, right, being owned by ESPN, I mean, it's, with all due respect, right, it's television first, and the game and the play of it and stuff, and the experience of it, I wouldn't call it secondary. I know they sell tickets and stuff and there's hospitality and stuff, but when you've got, you probably remember this better than anybody, right? I mean, I think in a span of 12 years or so, from 2008, I mean, it went from Magic Jack to the Beef O'Brady's Bowl. I think there was the Bad Boy Mowers for a couple of years.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
I think there was this company called BitPay in 2014 for a season.
Yep.
And it's since moved on to the Gasparilla Bowl and now being played up in the stadium where the Buccaneers play and stuff. But that's also going to drive you a bit mad too, because you got these sort of wacky names with these corporate sponsors. And it's probably more just kind of just a fun, unique experience versus sort of I don't know. It's kind of hard to kind of get around the pomp and circumstance of an actual bowl game per se, when you've got all these sort of whirling dervishes of marketing and teams and brands and all this stuff flying around.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so it's just a different mindset. And matter of fact, it's a lot easier. Quite honestly, it's a lot easier in dealing with fans and their concept and so forth. The East-West run game, again, a little bit more unique, but here are parents and families and grandparents who are thrilled just to see their son make this particular team. So yeah, they might be loyal to the East or the West team, but what they're really loyal to is their son that played at Tulane or whatever. And so you get to talk to them and how excited they are and what they remember taking them to practice and growing up. So it's a little more intimate, and it's much more fun. I don't want to say more fun because I really do enjoy the baseball game, but it's a different environment, and you have to understand a little bit more of the mindset of the fan who's coming.
I also want to give you great props for enlightening me about something that was a complete blind spot for me, that there was one game of the old UFL, the original United Football League, that was played at the Trop in 2009. I knew of the Florida Tuskers as a team. I for sure thought that they were based in Orlando, and they were, but not for that one game.
Right.
Were you at
Yeah.
that game, and or do
I
you know
was.
why? Okay, what do you have an idea why?
No, I don't. I don't know if it was just a scheduling conflict or whether they were trying to play one city against the other. But no, but it was just like, okay, we're watching this game of, I would didn't even there were not even a familiar name or two on the roster. So yeah, that was kind of unique. However, you're talking about unique for a minute, Tim. We've had a couple of times where like there was a hurricane that hit Houston one time, and Houston came and played the Rays were not playing. We were ushering a game between Houston and somebody else because their game had to be relocated. We had a game one time with the Rays playing the Orioles, and they had some civil unrest in Baltimore, and the game was moved to the Trop, but the Orioles were the home team. So, those kind of games kind of stick in your mind and going,
interesting.
Wait a
How
minute,
many of those were you? How many of those do you think there were in your span of time there? How many those kind of games were you?
Oh, I'd say a handful
Four.
at best. I would say 4 to 6, maybe.
These are
But
not
it was,
exhibitions. These were relocated.
no, these were real games. No, it was just they had to be done. And I know there was at least a couple of games again with hurricanes that the Rays had to go someplace else to play simply because it was just the situation was inhabitable for fans to come, or they had to get out before the storm hit. So, Mother Nature played it both ways. We have our team playing, and then they're the visiting team. Do we have a regular season game between Houston? I can't remember who they were playing, but they played 2 or 3 games, I think, here, and the Rays weren't even around. But here again, we're doing our job.
Okay, let's end with these two questions, and I want to hear. And we'll do some promotion and stuff. Obviously, we'll be promoting the heck out of the book during the course of the conversation and the preload and then all the social media and all that stuff. So fear not on that front.
No problem.
In terms of the quality of baseball now in the era of new rules with the clock and the ghost runners for extra innings and that kind of stuff, have you noticed in the stands more excitement or interest or following the game or any change, frankly, in terms of the experience of fans watching the games or not?
Yes, I would say yes, but I would think that would be age determined. Younger fans, and I would say when I say younger fans, I would say fans in their 40s or younger are are probably bigger proponents of the pitch clock, the ghost runner, those kind of things. People who have grown up and have been around a lot longer, I think, have pushed back a little bit more on some of those things. And the discussion came up again, when the World Series went into extra innings, should there be a ghost runner? And of course they don't. Um, so I would say yes, Tim, you do see that. And I think you see that people appreciate it speeds the game up more. And I think people like that better in the long run. Before that, we played a game, we played an ESPN Sunday night game at the Trop. I want to say it was like 2010 or so. We had the Red Sox in town. It went 16 innings. It was a 1-0 game, but it just took forever. And just it was over and over. And just after a while, when you get to extra innings with fans, I don't know what that is, but there's a point of no return where a fan goes, I've lasted this long, I'm not leaving now. Where you get some other fans after about the 11th inning or so, I got to go. But other people are just kind of stay. I'm going up and down the aisle and asking people what they want for breakfast, because we've been there that long, and how does that happen? So I would say the new rules have impacted a younger generation of people who like that. But the people that are diehard and grew up on the old rules, I think they kind of would like to see it stay the same.
All right, let's pivot to the future now. It's obvious as we record this, right? The stadium is being repaired. It looks like it's going to be online for May or June at least, right? For coming back
April. No,
April. Okay,
April.
so
Yeah,
we're at the
they
beginning of the
changed
season.
the Rays beginning schedule that they will play on the road for about the first week. I think they're in St. Louis, and I forgot where else they are, some cold weather towns. But right now, April the 6th, with the Chicago Cubs, will be the opening day for the Rays in 2026.
All right,
The
so
roof is, I was
yeah,
going to
so
say, go
yeah,
ahead.
go ahead. No, I was going to say, how do you, okay? So what have you been told about and or your own eyesight about the repairs and that kind of stuff, and how confident do you and the organization feel that it's going to be solid for the next couple of years?
Oh, obviously I can't speak for the organization, but I think absolutely it's going to be fine. And they're supposed to be done by Christmas, but my understanding is they might be ahead of schedule as far as putting the panels on. It's a very interesting process, and people have photographed it. I saw a site today, I think, from somebody, literally one of the workers on the roof with I guess some kind of GoPro or something showing how that's all being done. It's interesting though that the way they put the panels on, you can't put one after another in succession. You got to counterbalance the stadium because of the weight of those panels. And so, it's kind of an interesting pattern how it is. But I think everybody's confident that, this is going to happen. And come April the 6th, there'll be baseball, and it probably will be very close, maybe not identical to the dome that we left in September of 2024. But everything I can tell is that it will be fine, and fans are already chomping at the bit. Can't wait to come back.
And all that said, though, what do you think about the longer term future? I'm not. It's hard not. I got to think for a person in your position, you're a champion of the fan. You're making the experience as best as you can for the team and the arena in which it's played. But I'm sure it has to weigh on you, at least in the back of your mind, right? There's always this discussion in the air about, well, is there going to be a new stadium? Or they're going to, move to another location here in the area? Will the team move out of town altogether, as some rumor to happen? How do you feel about the state of the team? How confident do you feel it's going to stay in the region? And I think it's probably basically a fait accompli that if they do stay, there's going to be another stadium involved, right?
Oh, and there already was in place until Milton came. There were plans that they would start the beginning of 2025, at least building a parking garage so that they could put the new stadium on the exact site that it was. Due to the complication of the hurricane and ranging costs and stuff, that plan has now been scrapped. And so the team just got sold within the last month, maybe 6 weeks. But everything that I've read is that the owners plan on keeping the team in Tampa Bay. And that's one of the reasons they wanted to be on board with it. So until it happens, Tim, I'm taking 1 year at a time as
Sure.
far as that. And I plan on being back, this season. And we'll see from there. There's too many other things going on. I mean, good grief, you probably could have a whole show of the speculation of whether there will be a baseball season in 2027, with the unions and all those kind of things. So I try not to get into that. I just do what I do. I love what I do. I appreciate the Rays organization for giving me the opportunity to do that, as well as, and, kind of just talk about the book just for a second. They gave me permission to do it. I wrote it, and then they had to approve it because I'm an employee, and they said that was fine. And so I really appreciate them allowing me to be able to put something that was in my heart, and also that I thought was very unique, that I couldn't find but one book out there that really wrote from baseball from an usher's perspective.
All right, here's the last question then. What do you,
Sure.
what do you anticipate your feelings to be as you walk back into that stadium for the first time after having been away from it for a year plus and given all the drama and the just the state of the situation with the hurricane did to the facility and all that kind of stuff. What do you think your feelings are going to be as you walk back in there, back to the grind and with the fans?
Great question. I think it'll be very emotional for me. At least I'm anticipating that. First thing I would say is opening day in baseball is unlike any other. The best way I could associate it is it's almost if you remember back going to school and your first day back to school after summer vacation. You see all kinds of people. You ask them what they've been doing and how are they. Now, all of a sudden, that takes on a different dynamic because now it's been 2 seasons, so to speak, before you've seen them and what's changed and, how are they and what did they do and some people I've stayed in touch with, but a lot of people I certainly haven't. How did you survive the hurricane? And so there'll be a lot of reunion, so to speak, in regards to that. But I think for me personally, I think it'll be very emotional. I've spent a lot of time in that stadium. And so it's, like I said, it became a friend. And when I saw my friend wounded, that touched me. I grieved. So the opportunity to be able to walk back in and recognize that and to it won't be just like it never changed or it didn't happen. I think it'll be a very different feeling, appreciation, and I think emotional. I expect it to be at least chills up my spine.
And probably a new turning point for the team, right? Because of the new ownership, the state of the stadium, where that process was before the changing of the guard. I got to think it's also got to be a little bit of trepidation and a little worry, but also maybe a little bit of excitement, frankly, about what the next stage of this franchise's and facilities, wherever it might be, life might be.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's opening day. That's the hope of every franchise. So this could be the year, this could be the season, and so forth. And that's where the job of an usher is. It's kind of like, yeah, you want to be a fan, but you're also an employee. And so you can't get too much caught up in that. You can't get too much caught up in even watching the game at the game. You've got a responsibility to make sure that you are giving fans an experience. One of the signs over where we hang our clothes and everything else is energizing the community through the magic of baseball. That's my goal. How can I enhance your experience to do that? That could be from goofiness of a hat to a conversation about baseball to, joking off together, whatever it might be. So, that's how I'm looking at 2026. It'll be an exciting season. And, there are people already counting down to how many days it is.
All right, as we await the reopening of the Dome, let's get set for it. The book, it's called There Is No Place Like Dome, a fan host's unofficial view from the top of the Trop to the stands with the fans. It is published by St. Petersburg Press, and it is available now, as we speak, wherever fine books are found. Of course, you can order a copy via our website at goodseatsstillavailable.com. Just search up this episode numbered 421. The conversation that you just heard with myself and Mr. Reynolds. And you get yourself a copy, either the Kindle version or the paperback version, through the auspices of Amazon, where we get a couple of shekels of referral love for said process. You can also, he says, find the links in your podcast description here. In whatever feed set up or however you're consuming this episode, just look in the show notes. You'll find the convenient links in there, too. Either way works, and you'll be glad you did, as they say. Hey, if you're down there, you know what? We got to make our way down there at some time this upcoming season. And if you happen to go to a game and you want to seek out Mr. Reynolds, please do so. And when you do, make sure you take a picture and send it to us and said, hey, Hanlon and Good Seats Still Available sent me, and I had to meet you. And you can celebrate your love of the game and raise baseball and conjecture about where they might be moving in the years ahead. You can follow the doings of Bruce and his book Journey On the socials, you'll find them on Instagram and Facebook. Instagram, I think, is the best place, if I remember correctly. That's Reynolds Rap. That's Reynolds, Reynolds, Rap, R-A-P, 3152. So on Instagram, that's Reynolds Rap, it's R-A-P, 3152. And of course, a website has been set up for Bruce and his book, and that is this address. There is no place like dome.com. All one word. There is no place like dome.com. Pretty simple. All right. Our website is goodseatsstillavailable.com. Pretty simple there, too. All of our episodes are posted there. We stream them there. You can grab them and embed them on your website if you'd like to remember a team or a league or conversation that we had. Happy to have you embed that and share the love and get people to taste the show before they subscribe to it on their their favorite podcast feeder systems and whatever. We appreciate that. We've got some great merch there from our friends at oldschoolshirts.com and royalretros.com and a bunch of other things there too. You can follow us on the various socials. On Blue Sky, you'll find us at goodseatsstillavailable.com. On the Twitter X thing, we are found at Good Seats Still, and just about everywhere else, including YouTube, by the way, at Good Seats Still Available, all one word. And our email address is hello@goodseatsstillavailable.com. Many ways to follow us and engage with us, and thank you, all of our great listeners, for doing so over the years. And hope you had a good time this week. And we're going to tee up, hopefully, something fun and exciting for you next week. Thanks for listening, as always. And get ready for the turkeys coming soon.